Hello and bonjour, I'm Sarah Bukhari and you're watching Power Dilemmas here at TAC TV. Canada is concerned about the national security threat posed by citizens who joined the Islamic State group returning to this country, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Monday. In Parliament, Trudeau pledged to prosecute those who broke Canada's anti-terrorism laws by joining the ISIS group, but also said his government would try to reintegrate them into society. Nearly 180 Canadians are known to have traveled overseas to join extremist groups. About 60 have returned to Canada, according to government figures released in 2016. The recruiters had promised an Islamic utopia, but it was just a cruel police state, as mentioned by one ISIS returnee fighter who did not want to die for this utopian Islamic state. He was frightened and disillusioned, according to this global news story. What is the risk matrix attached to the return of these ISIS fighters or /Jehadis? In the worst case scenario, one or more of those returnees with terrorist and/or combat experience may target elements of Canadian society, said an RCMP report obtained under the Access to Information Act. They may use Canada as a base for targeting others, including the United States. So to talk about the security matrix, the stance taken by the Liberal government and the opposition Conservatives, how are they thinking about it? What kind of security threat is posed by these returnee jihadists? We have in our show very informed guest, and I'm so honored to have him, Jerry Nichols. Jerry is a communication consultant and regular columnist with Ottawa Hill Times, and a panelist on CTV News channel Power and Play. What an honor to have you, Jerry, at my show.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's start the discussion. It's a very sensitive issue, but an issue which has to be resolved right now, or maybe it will take time. So my question is, why would Canadians leave Canada, a country giving them security, welfare, free national health, to join the ISIS fighters in Syria or elsewhere?
Well, Sarah, I think that's a question that a lot of political leaders and security officials in Europe and the United States and Canada are trying to figure out. Why is it people leave their families and their community and their country to go participate in what, was basically a death cult, a very cruel and depraved organization? What causes these young people to do that? And I'm not an expert on security, but my sense is that the people who run ISIS are masters at propaganda. And using, social media, they can reach out to these people and they can sort of twist their mission into some kind of idealistic battle. And they know how to, convince these young people that this is a great way to give meaning to their life. And sometimes idealism is a hard concept to fight. And sometimes they only have to go out there and then sort of collide with reality to see what's really at stake here. But how can we stop that? Well, that's a tough question. It's hard to battle that kind of ideology.
Yes, and the global news story mentioned one returnee or jihadi /returnee /ISIS fighter is regretting now that why he joined the ISIS there in Syria. So do you think there is a lot of regret in these returnee fighters back into Canada?
Well, of course, a lot of them are actually killed over there. A lot of them end up dead. So yeah, it's a very dangerous situation. They're going into war zones. So yeah, I can imagine that a lot of them, once they get there, quickly become disillusioned. Not only because the war is not as glorious as they may have hoped, and secondly, they probably find that these ISIS people are not the friendliest bunch in the world, and that associating with these people can be hazardous to their health. So I think a lot of them come back here, and they might be thinking, you know what? That was a huge mistake, and I'm glad I'm back here.
Okay, let's now connect it to the political scenario in Canada. When Justin Trudeau is saying that he's going to reintegrate these ISIS fighter returnees or ISIS returnees or fighter returnees. What does he mean by this? Aren't they dangerous? Because they are, these people were trained by ISIS, and we know what evil machinery ISIS is. So what does he mean when he says he's going to reintegrate them back into the Canadian society?
Well, Sarah, I actually, have a theory about that. So take it for what it's worth, because it's only my theory. But my sense is that left-wing progressive parties in Europe, in the United States, and Canada, including the Liberal Party, have a blind spot when it comes to battling terrorism. There's nothing in their ideology which really prepares them for how to deal with this kind of threat. And so it's like basically the best idea they can come up with is, well, maybe if we're nice to them, they'll stop killing us. And I think that's kind of what Justin Trudeau is trying to do here. He's saying, yeah, these people might be dangerous, but if we reach out to them and we tell them about the wonders of our civilization and our culture, that they'll give up the dream of helping ISIS. Now, that might work. I don't know. But it's a very dangerous game for them to play politically. Because for the average Canadian out there, they're not interested in rehabilitating these guys. They're like, arrest them, kick them out of the country, do whatever, but protect us from them. So I think for Justin Trudeau to go down that road, it's a little bit risky for him politically.
Yes, and what does he mean by de-radicalization of these ISIS fighters?
Well, I think there are several dimensions that you can use when fighting ISIS. I think obviously there's a military dimension. We got to kill them, essentially. There's a diplomatic dimension. We have to make alliances with people in the region to make sure that we can corner them, we can deprive them of resources, whatever. There's a police aspect to it. We have to make sure we keep track of these people, we know where they are, where we can thwart their plans. And lastly, there's an ideological component, or an ideological dimension to this. In other words, we have to fight the ideology of ISIS with an ideology of our way of life. And we have to say that what those guys are doing is dangerous, it's wrong, it's deadly, it's not going to bring you anywhere. Here's the right way to approach it. And I think that's my sense of what Trudeau is going to be trying to do. He's going to be trying to battle them on an ideological level. That's tough. And I'm not sure he can pull it off. We'll see.
So if I ask you as a citizen of Canada, do you think ISIS fighters, the returnee fighters, are a threat? If they start living in your neighborhood, would you be threatened? Would you be scared?
Yeah, absolutely I'd be scared. I mean, we've seen what happens in Europe. We've seen in Berlin, in Paris, we've seen in Edmonton, what these people are capable of. And it doesn't take a lot of organization, really. I mean, one of them decides one day to get into a van and drive people down, in a crowded street. And these people are like, a lot of these people are like ticking time bombs, right? We don't know when they're going to go off. Now, some of them, as we discussed earlier, probably said, I've had it, and I don't want anything to do with this anymore. But there are others which are probably still ideologically committed to what ISIS believes in. And what can we do about that? I mean, it is scary, and I'm not sure anybody really has an answer.
If the government's definition of de-radicalization is that these ISIS returnees could be trained to be positive citizens, contribute to the society, if they mean by that how far they could de-radicalize them, can they undo the brainwashing done by ISIS?
Theoretically, yes. I think they can, for some. But I think there will always be those hardcore cases which are going to remain committed to ISIS, no matter what the government says to them, no matter what enticements it offers them, no matter how it tries to, counter the brainwashing of ISIS. There's always going to be that danger that some people out there are going to remain, militants and supporters of ISIS. And there's nothing really we can do about it except keep an eye on them and to make sure that our security forces are keeping track of them. And unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't work. As we've seen in Europe, some of these terrorist attacks are committed by people who, in theory, were under police watch. But they still carry out these terrorist actions. And again, part of the problem is, how do you stop this? How do you stop a guy who wakes up one morning and says, I'm going to take a butcher knife and start slashing people in a shopping mall?
That is a very scary, scary thought.
It's like, how do we stop that? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a real problem.
What is the stance of the Conservatives who are now sitting in the opposition? They're not very happy with what Justin Trudeau is saying, right?
Well, I think for the, politically speaking, for the Conservatives, this is a good issue. This is something they can really feast on, because the Conservatives have a brand of being tough on terrorism, strong in defense, and tough on crime. So they want to talk about this issue. They want to sort of, keep attacking the Liberals on this. You're not doing enough. You're not keeping Canadians safe. Because if this becomes an issue, then it works to the Conservatives in terms of a political advantage. Because if people get frightened, and if people think Justin Trudeau isn't doing enough, they might turn to the Conservatives. Because I think at a very basic level, what people want from government is to be kept safe. They want the government to protect them. And if they get the sense that the government isn't protecting them, that Justin Trudeau's, more interested in, I'm going to rehabilitate these guys. If people think, well, that's not good enough, they might become disillusioned with Trudeau. And I think the Liberals understand this. I think they do. I think they've done some polling on this, or they're reading what's happening in the media, because lately they've been kind of talking a lot tougher. I noticed Ralph Goodale, the public security minister, released a statement today in which he talked about, these ISIS guys, they're dangerous barbarians and they're depraved, and anyone that's coming in here, you better believe we're going to be keeping an eye on them. So I think the Liberals get a sense that their little rehabilitation stuff isn't going over very well with the public, and that's not surprising.
Do you think that Conservatives take this issue up? Conservatives can win a victory in the 2019 election, which is kind of next year, we're in December 27.
Well,
November 27.
It's coming up sooner. I think it helps them. And I'm not sure it's enough to turn the tide. I'm not sure if it's enough to say, the Liberals are going to lose on this issue. But it's enough to kind of chip away at the Liberal lead. And if, God forbid, there ever is a terrorist attack in Canada, some serious terrorist attack.
Yeah, God forbid.
A lot of people might blame the Liberals. And, that could inflict serious damage in the Liberal brand if that's the case. If people think, hey, you know what? These guys are in the country, and you didn't do anything, and they committed this terrorist attack, we're blaming you. So I think this is probably the thing that keeps Liberal strategists awake at night. How do we prevent that from happening?
So again, my mind goes back to the question: why is Justin Trudeau, the Liberals, are so laxed about it?
Well,
the sunny ways.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, I'm not sure it's exactly lax. I think they are concerned about it. But it's difficult for Justin Trudeau to kind of take on this issue the way, for instance, a Stephen Harper would. Stephen Harper's brand was he was a tough guy, and he was going to deal with Putin, and he was going to deal with the terrorists. It was part of his, part of his political persona. Justin Trudeau has a completely different political persona. He's a Barney the dinosaur kind of guy. He's a Care Bear. He wants to talk about sensitivity and empathy. He wants to talk about climate change. He wants to talk about feminism, and he wants to talk about all that kind of stuff. He doesn't want to talk about terrorism. He doesn't want to talk about wars, because that's not really his bit. That's not really his strength as a politician. So I think this is part of the reason why he wants to sort of stay away from kind of the tough talk, at least initially. If we remember when there was the terrorist attack on the Boston Marathon a few years ago, Trudeau's first reaction was, we have to deal with the root causes of terrorism. And I worked in New England for a while. I have a lot of friends there, and when they heard that, they were livid. That's not what they want to hear from the politician. They want to hear somebody say, we're going to fight these guys. We're going to crush these guys. That's what they want to hear. It's hard for Trudeau to talk that way. It's just not in his makeup.
Maybe he should say a terrorist is a terrorist is a terrorist, because he's famous to call a lot of things. Yeah, and by the three coasts we have.
Yeah. Well, he's the one who's a Canadian, which of course leads people to think, well, these terrorists are Canadians. Now he might be right theoretically, he might be right legally, but politically, a lot of people say they're not Canadians. As soon as they join ISIS, they're traitors, and
that's the dilemma.
Right. So this is something I think, again, this is a weakness in Trudeau. And the Conservatives, probably, if I was advising them, I'd say, if you see a weakness in your opponent, attack it and keep talking about it. So yeah, I think the Conservatives will try to make some hay on this.
Okay, because we as Canadians, we would like to feel safe.
Right.
A lot of us are immigrants, including me, of course, who have come from countries which are
Right.
marred by the menace of terrorism. And we don't want to see the same thing in our beautiful country, Canada, which is
Right.
a piece of heaven.
Well, it doesn't matter where you come from. People want to be protected. They want to feel secure in their homes. And this is just, part of human nature. And we all expect the government to be the one that protects us. Like, they're the ones who have the police force, they're the ones who have the army, they're the ones who have the security. Why? Because their first job is to keep us safe. And if there's ever a sense that the government is not keeping us safe, and I think this explains the rise of politicians like Donald Trump in the United States, or with the nationalist populist parties in Europe, because they are saying to the voters, we're going to keep you safe. We're going to keep the bad guys out. We're going to bomb them. We're going to kill them. Now, those answers might be simplistic. They might be the wrong answers, but they're answers, right? And they resonate on an emotional level with voters. People say, yeah, I like that because he's going to keep me safe. And this is the dilemma that a lot of left-wing progressive parties face, is it's hard for them to talk like that. It's hard for Trudeau to talk like that. And this is a weak point for him. And we'll see if the Conservatives can exploit that.
Okay, thank you very much, Jerry, to come to my show today. Amazing discussion. And folks, we live in a land, Canada, a land of equality, liberty, democracy. Our Canadian forces are guarding this very spirit of our country, which is democracy, equality. We have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And we should not let anyone to disturb our peace. I believe the returnee jihadis, returnee ISIS fighters should be dealt with a strong hand. And there's so many immigrants who've left their countries to live and take shelter and refuge in Canada. Canada's peace should not be disturbed. Canada is a piece of heaven, and we should let it stay like this. Thank you very much for joining today. Ciao.
#1 multicultural channel. This is TAG TV.